Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of In Lay Terms. I'm your host, Payman Ascari. 1,000 apologies for the delay. We had some technical issues, such as life in 2025. Today, my guest with me is Mr. Scott McPhee. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So, Scott, you are, and I'm going to look down and read this, you're the president of the PEI PPC Regional Association. And if I
Yes,
understand correctly, you were also a previous candidate?
I was a candidate in the last election in the riding of Charlottetown, PEI. Yeah.
All right, great. I always like getting a fellow or former candidate on to discuss, why you ran and why you're still with the party. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So I usually start. Sorry, I usually start the show. Hey, Prairie. Good morning. I start the show by asking the guests if you could tell the audience. I want the audience to get to know you. So, like, where were you born? Where were you raised? And what have you seen change in Canada across your life?
I'm from PEI. I was born in PEI. I've lived here most of my life. I did spend a few years in Toronto, but I've been here the majority of my life. Um, my mother's a cook. She's retired. My father was RCMP, but is also now retired. So pretty regular life, I guess. So I lived in Stratford most of my life, which is the third largest city or town in PEI. I currently live in Summerside, which is the second biggest. Um, I wasn't even politically conscious really until I would say 2015 when Donald Trump. I remember everything coming together when Donald Trump announced that he was running for president. That's when I really started paying attention to everything. Um, and when he first started, I thought that he was an absolute clown, just a loudmouth, annoying. I thought it was a joke. But then he started talking about his policies, and I was like, well, this man is talking my language now. So I quickly saw past the his stage performance, so to speak, and I realized that there's actually people out there that are willing to put their reputation and whatever on the line for to make the world a better place. So that's when I really became uh, when I really started paying attention to politics, American and Canadian, and worldwide for that matter. So previous to that, I kind of was all over the place. I would consider myself now conservative minded, but I've previously voted NDP. I've provincially, I've always voted conservative because the other ones are out to lunch here. Conservative is the only thing even close to um, anything sane MPEI anyway. But federally, I've kind of been all over the place. I was actually a member for a long time of the Pirate Party of Canada. I don't know if you've ever heard of that one. They were kind of for internet freedoms, is what their claim to fame was. They never had a candidate in PI, so I never did get to vote for them. But they started becoming woke when Donald Trump became president. So I sent them a letter to revoke my membership with them. And then through the rumblings, I heard of Maxime losing the leadership race to Andrew Scheer, and that was a big thing at the time when this kind of started happening. When I left the Pirate Party because of their wokeness, and so I started looking into Maxime, and like everything he said, I was like, this is exactly what I believe. There's almost absolutely nothing about what he says that I don't agree with, and that's just happenstance. I idolize the man for what he does and for what he's done, but he's not a god, but he just happens to line up so much with what I believe that it was very inspirational. So the second, literally the hour that he launched the party, I joined as a member, so I'm a founding member right away. And unfortunately, in the first election that the PPC was involved in, there was no candidates on PEI at all, so I didn't get to vote for them. And the second election, they were putting out feelers before the election happened. I've always been very outspoken and whatnot, but I was in nursing at the time and working for the government, very liberal government, even on PEI, and then trying to push a conservative agenda. I knew it was going to be very, very difficult, so I was apprehensive. But the election was called. It was like a week into it. They were saying, "Is anybody in PEI interested?" Because we only had one person out of the four ridings. So I put my name forward, and I guess here we are now.
So I was like you as well. I originally had Trump derangement syndrome in 2016. And then I kind of looked at his policies and I looked at what he was saying, and it just made sense. And I think that's kind of what attracted me to Bernier as well, where he's sort of long format and he just lays everything out. It's not just all slogans. So.
Yeah, he has a foundational belief of what he bases his policies off of. That's what the PPC is: the four founding principles: fairness, respect, responsibility, and freedom. And the policies reflect that. The policies have pretty much stayed the same since the party's founding. Obviously, you have to update policies from time to time because the culture shifts and things change. The immigration has gotten way worse than it was, so we've updated our policy to reflect that. We originally had, I believe, it was the 150,000 person target. Now it's zero. It has to be halted, and people have to be removed that are here now illegally. I think there's something. The last report I heard was something like 1.4 million people here past their visa alone. So things are out
Just a
of
minor
control.
number, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, no big deal. That's that's what 10 times the population of my province. It's just mind blowing. So, things are changed to reflect the realities of modern day, and I think that's wonderful. It's just really actually based on common sense. The man has principles. So people don't agree with, obviously one of our big things is supply management. There's a lot of people that don't agree with that, but he believes in free trade, and he says that this is how it is. I believe in that. I have family that are dairy farmers. I don't like the PPC because of that, but it is what it is. I believe in the free trade. I'm behind it, and I understand why some people aren't. But some people, you have to be flexible. You have to be open minded. At least listen to the argument. A lot of people don't realize that we're giving, our policy is to give a 5-year window when where everything will be the same, but you have to learn how to change your business in order to be profitable. But we're going to remain the same for 5 years. People don't even know that. So there's a lot of digging their head in the sand. A lot of people just don't want to listen to anything that we have to say because what they hear from the CBC, the almighty CPC.
Yeah, the CPC and the CBC,
Both, yeah.
diluting everything. So, Scott, we have our first angry audience member, and it's Prairie as well. I would agree with Maxime as well, but where the heck is he? We should be hearing from him lots and loud now. Scott, since you're the president, I'm going to let you handle this one.
So Maxime is everywhere all the time. He's, I think he did take a break at Christmas. You got to give the man a little bit of leeway, but so a good example of this is that Maxime was on PEI late June of last year. He was here for our Guns and Buns event. We can talk about that later, but it was our biggest fundraiser of the year, and he came to support us in that. And at the time, I don't know if you heard, there was it was a hunger strike protest going on, put on by Indian immigrants in Charlottetown, where they set up a little illegal encampment at the time it was government property, and they're holding these fake hunger strikes. So he happened to be here at the time. He didn't come here for that, but I was driving him in the car just back to his hotel after an event, and I said, "Do you want to pop in there and say hello to them?" He's like, "Yes, I do." So we went there and we just impromptu talked to a few ladies that were there. They were very pleasant, and they said, "Wait a minute, we'll get the leader to come talk to you because he's not far away." So they called him. I don't know if you've seen the video on his Twitter. It has 1.1 million views, and it got that in 3 days of him telling the Indians that you are not needed here. We don't want you. Canadians are hurting too much. You have to return especially as soon as your visa is gone. We don't need Tim Hortons workers. We don't need call center workers. We need nurses and construction workers. You are not benefiting Canada. You have to leave. CBC would not. I went to the CBC office myself in person here. They would not entertain an interview with Max whatsoever. Trudeau and Pierre were here, I think, within 3 weeks of that, and both of them got full sit-down interviews and full coverage of their tour. So Max did a tour in PEI. They will not give Max or any of us a second of their time. So Max is touring all the time. He is at events all over Canada all the time. But unless you're following his Twitter, unless you're following his Facebook page, you wouldn't know it because we do not get any coverage. And it is one of the main reasons CBC has, and the corporate welfare to these media organizations has to go. They're poison.
So you mentioned corporate welfare. The giving like $1 billion to CBC, that's election interference, isn't it? Let me
when
do
they
you follow my
refuse.
reasoning? That's like almost like
Yeah,
giving $1 billion campaign contribution to principally the Liberals, but also the Conservatives and NDP.
and I think it's the only reason that Trudeau's been in power for 9 years is that he just continually pumps free money to the CBC and other organizations. Um, I don't believe he would be in power more than the first term if the if he didn't own the media. They just constantly praise him in the most ridiculous aspects, and anything negative going on, they'll just briefly skim over it and move on. But then Maxime, like, when's the last time you heard of something happened at PEI that got 1 million views? I don't think ever. Like, I don't think there's anything. But no one knows about this. But like, I'll send you the link if you want. But it's like the video was really good. It's only a few minutes long, but he's just yelling at the Indian protesters, and there's a whole thing to that. We did a protest here, a counter protest against them. It was a whole ordeal, and the local newspaper did cover our counter protest, to be fair, but barely, and it wasn't even that fair.
No, I remember the video. Just to give you to what do you want? Like support your argument. Prairie says she doesn't watch X or Facebook much, so she probably didn't even see the video.
Yeah, maybe not, but that's we have to use these alternative media, I guess they call it, because the mainstream or corporate media won't give us the time of day. Even if we do something good or newsworthy where it would make them money, they hate us that much as that they'll refuse. So
Do
that's
you
where we are.
do you have candidates right now in any of your writings?
We do not at the moment. We had some lined up, and the Conservative Party of Canada had a poaching campaign where they stole one of our candidates. They were trying to steal some of our head people in the Maritimes, and so they stole one of ours. They stole two of New Brunswick's, and of course they took them over to run in their candidate nomination, and of course they didn't win. But once you leave the PPC to run as a conservative in the Conservative Party, you can't run in the PPC again, especially in the same election. So they just ruined our candidates. So there's been a campaign against us actively in the land of Canada for sure, but we currently do not have any candidates for the island. There's a couple people that kind of have their name forward and they'll run if no one else runs, type of thing. But we want someone to represent the island with passion. So we're actively looking if anybody knows.
Scott, your audio just changed. Did you change? Did your microphone change?
No.
I don't mind it. Just we can still hear you. It's always risky doing tech adjustments in the middle of an interview.
Yeah, true enough.
All right, it's all good.
We'll see.
What was I going to say? If a PPC candidate leaves, if they're poachable by the Conservative Party, you probably didn't want them to begin with. Like, there is a reason I'm running for the PPC, not the CPC.
That's exactly it. Obviously, they weren't committed. If people see the wages that the members of Parliament get, and some people are just in it for the money. Like, they get almost $200,000 a year in salary. It's crazy. So, you want people that are in it for the right reasons, not for the money or the fame or the. So, it's not a bad thing that the people left, but there is a campaign against us, so we have to be wary of that.
Let me ask you about that. I heard horror stories that in 2019 there was like a massive assault on Newfoundland, and they just took out all the candidates. Does anything like that happen in PEI?
Actually, it has. So the EDA that I am president of right now is all 4 ridings of PEI are just under one electoral district association. So I cover the whole island. Normally, and all the other parties, I believe, have separate EDAs for each riding. So prior to our EDA, that was actually only introduced after the election, after the last election. So it was early 2022, I believe, that we were official. There was another EDA on PEI for Charlottetown and one for Egmont, which is the West End. And they were infiltrated by literally communists, and it was dissolved. So it did happen here as well.
How does that play out in first, by the way, you got a shout out from Publius Cornelius, respect for going against the grain. So thanks.
Oh, thank you.
How does that play out in practice? Like the guy gets in, he's like, "I love laissez-faire capitalism," and then what? He starts, putting the Soviet Union sickle and hammer on.
Well, I wasn't present for it, so I don't know exactly how it happened to PEI, but I have some of the documentation, some of the people that were there, I know. But I think it was during like an AGM where they somehow brought enough people to get voted into a position. And then once they were in the position, they just ruined the organization on purpose. And then it just dissolved and that was it. So, and I know like, so these people, when they joined the party to be part of the EDI and PEI, they signed non-disclosure agreements, and so I have all their names, so I can look them up, and they have literally hammer and sickles on their profiles and stuff. Like it's not it's nothing hidden. It's very obvious.
So I guess this is an argument. I mean, I'd love to have a constitution for the PPC, but once you open it up to votes to the public, and you're such a small party, with a handful of people, the conservatives or whoever, bad actors, they can just flood the AGMs and destroy the party.
Yeah, so that's obviously something that we're well aware of. One of the ways around that so after the last election, we had a leadership review, I guess it's called, and so part of that, when it was announced, is I believe, I can't remember the exact details, but it was something to the effect of, when it was announced, you can no longer buy a membership at that point. So just like how Maxime lost the leadership race at the Conservative Party, they just got a whole bunch of dairy farmers and all their supporters to buy Conservative memberships to vote against Maxime. So it was just a vote buying scheme, or a like it's just fraud, really, I guess is what it is, to put it plainly. So to work around that, I was obviously it's a very real thing. So I said, as in the leadership race, or the leadership review that we had after the last election, there was a quick cutoff, so people couldn't buy votes or buy memberships just to vote in that, just to stir things up. So we have to be very cautious of stuff like that.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to give like a supermajority vote to the previous candidate or existing president, like something to prevent this hostile takeover.
Yeah. There's active campaigns against the PPC, and you have to be very wary of that. And that's one of the issues that where there is constitutional documents drafted, but they have to be rock solid, because if they're unsteady at all, if they can be easily manipulated, there's no point in having them.
I can imagine like 200 years ago, the American founding fathers probably had a similar talk. It's like,
Absolutely,
how do
theirs
we-
is ridiculously good. Yeah. Hopefully, ours can be somewhat 10% as good as that.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, I wanted to ask you a question about something else you mentioned. You mentioned you voted. You seem like you're very like a knowledgeable voter. You voted NDP. You vote conservative within your province. What is it about the NDP federally that attracted you to them, and what was it that changed that made you walk away?
Well, so I voted the NDP. I think the first year I was eligible to vote, and it was really because I was tricked on what the NDP was. I think, just out of high school, and literally I believe it was a law teacher that we had was explaining the system back in high school, and said that the NDP was for Atlantic Canada. That was their whole thing, and the Conservatives were for Alberta. Like, they just broke Canadian politics down so absurdly. So that's why I voted for them at the time.
Okay.
But NDP is not what it used to be. Like, it used to be a reasonable, rational party, in my view. I don't agree with a lot of the stuff they stand for, I guess, but it was reasonable. Jagmeet, or Jimmy, as his real name is, he is a very unreasonable person. He is a showman. He reminds me of Bernie Sanders in the state. Like, he's doing advertisements for these $1,000 chairs in his Instagram posts. He's wearing Rolexes. Like, I don't know a freaking Rolex, but I don't push for socialism. Like, he's so hypocritical that like he's just a liar. And I don't know how anybody has any. There's a lot of NDP people that left the NDP. The voters left the NDP and became PPC members during the last election. I believe it was 33% of our voter base in the last election was NDP and Green voters that left their parties, because the parties are no longer based on their founding principles. Like the Green Party, based on environmentalism, like they just push DEI transgender nonsense now. Like, what the hell does that have to do with environment? Like, I'm all for environmental stewardship. I'm very much believe in that. But what does these far left policies on transgenderism have to do with the Green Party? Nothing. It's just the drunkard Elizabeth May has taken over, and it's crazy. It's crazy.
It's astounding how Elizabeth May, she gets such a pass from the media. Like if she was a leader of the PPC, they would heckle her everywhere she went.
Yeah, if you remember, she showed up. It was like an award show or some kind of event where she was jumped on the mic and she was completely drunk, like super drunk, and no one remembers that. Like it was unbelievable. Like, so that should have ruined anybody else's political career, but I don't know how she's still there.
Even when she's sober, she's not really articulate, and like she's not charismatic. She looks like a doofus.
Yeah, it's I feel bad for the Green Party. Like I know a lot of people that are lifelong diehard Green Party supporters, and they can't believe what it's turned into, and they're very upset about it. And they some of them still voted Green Party, but some of them have come over to the PPC personally that I know, and they say you're the most reasonable now. I'm with you, so come on over.
Prairie Jagmeet comes off as a thug, in my opinion.
He thinks he
Thug-like.
is.
Yeah, a poor man's thug. What about the Conservative Party? Like, what federal? What's your view on them? Have you voted for them? Would you vote for them?
I voted for them in the 2015 election because I hate Trudeau. Before I even got into power, I hated him. So with like the last two leaders, Andrew Scheer and I can't remember the other guy's name. So he was so unimportant, I forget his name. Who was the fellow after Andrew Scheer?
O'Toole.
Oh, Aaron O'Toole. Like, what conservative value did Aaron O'Toole hold? If like it was just like literally Conservative Party light in full swing. Like it made no sense whatsoever. It was an embarrassment. That's why we got a lot of support from previous Conservative voters because of like their policy they put out. I have a copy of the last the platform for the Conservatives in the 2021 election, and it's just like it's full of transgender stuff, and there's no conservative values to be found. It seems they're just pushing leftist talking points, and there's the only Conservative Party in Canada right now, I believe, is the PPC, and yeah.
So let's take a moment and define conservatism. I mean, I would start it out by saying, the nuclear family, fiscal responsibility, Christian values, opposition to maybe abortion. What would you add anything to that? Or move?
That's pretty fair, I guess. Yeah. So the West is based on Judeo-Christian values. I'm not a religious person at all. However, obviously, like I believe in a lot of the stuff that I hold dear. A lot of the stuff the Bible teaches. The good stuff, I'll take it out. I don't want any of the superstitious stuff. But the values that the West is based on, I believe, are mostly good for society. As far as other values of conservatism and all, I think traditionalism. I think the slow change, like this, society always has to progress, but conservatives, in my view, their role is to slow the change to make sure that the change is reasonable and necessary. Where progressives just want to push things forward as fast as possible, whatever they think is the best thing for society. They just want to jam it down everyone's throats right away, like the transgenderism, the puberty blockers for children, obviously, that now obviously is turned out to be not true. Puberty blockers are not reversible, severe damage, cancers and whatnot. But they just think that they just go with their feelings instead of actual reality. So I think that's the main difference between progressivism and conservatism is just the rate of change is much slower. I think change is necessary, but you have to be reasonable about it.
I would guess based on that definition, then the conservatives are conservative because technically they are, the liberals are just progressive. They want everything changed quickly, and the conservatives are a little bit slower change.
A little bit slower, I guess. But once you start going down certain paths of like ruining women's sports, for example. That's not a conservative thing. You want to conserve the right for women to have their own sports and their own locker rooms and changing spaces. It's stuff like that as well. I guess my definition is lacking, but you have to protect the vulnerable in society. I think that's one of the conservatives' values. And I guess what is vulnerable is would be viewed differently what a progressive and a conservative-minded person would think. But I think vulnerable is someone that can't necessarily protect themselves or has biological insufficiencies. Like men are stronger than women, just biological fact. So women should be guarded in that aspect.
There's certain things that you can't really explain it using words, but you just feel it's wrong. Like when you go to a conference, you're talking to a lady, and then you go to the bathroom, and she's there. You're like, wait a minute, no. We should have two separate bathrooms. Like that should be a rule.
Yeah, I haven't had that happen yet, but yeah, I guess some things are innate, and it's more of a. It just feels wrong in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, I would consider myself a classical liberal. Really, I wouldn't even say I'm a conservative person necessarily. One of the things, the religious thing, I think religion is for some reason imbued in conservatism. I'm not religious whatsoever, so there's definitely things where I don't fall into conservative category cleanly either. I just want to be left alone. I'm in that camp. I think people should be, the government should be small. People should be left to their own devices, and like small government is the key, I think.
So I was going to ask you to define classical liberalism, but is that your definition? Like government should be small, leave the individual alone?
Well, there's 1,000 definitions for everything these days. Depends on what you mean, but I believe people should be free to do their own thing. I think government should be small. They should be, taxes should be less. That we should be looking after ourselves. I think that like the gay situation, I open to it. I don't think that what's the word I'm trying to think of? What adults do in their own time should be left to the adults as long as they're being reasonable within the law and not hurting anybody. I think that's a huge classical liberal value. I just want to be left alone by the government. I want to do my own thing. I don't want all my taxes taken away for nonsense. Send to foreign aid to countries that we've never been, never heard of, that do nothing for us. I want the religion out of my life. I want to be able to do my own thing. I don't want to be forced to wear a burqa. I don't want to be forced to go to church. I don't want to be forced to do prayers. It just along those lines, I guess, is what I mean.
What about drugs? Like, should people be allowed to consume cocaine in the privacy of their own home? Like, where do we draw the line?
Well, that's that is not a simple answer. If I was forced to give a simple answer, it would be no. One of the reasons that our healthcare is government funded, so the more people do stuff like that, the more healthcare costs. People do not do drugs inside the safety of their own home. I unfortunately live in Summerside. There's a lot of methamphetamine use here. If people just stayed in their couches and did meth, everything would probably be okay. But they don't. They wander out in the streets and they break stuff and they steal and they fight. And there was a shooting here, which is a very, very rare thing for PEI. There was an attempted murder in Summerside over meth. So if people did it on their own time and it didn't affect, of course it's going to affect things. It's going to affect your family. But if they stayed in their home and did it on weekends, what's the harm in that, I guess? But that's not reality. That'll never happen. It doesn't happen. So as a whole, I think drugs should be banned. Even marijuana. Marijuana's terrible. Being in healthcare, one of the biggest issues I found with marijuana is that a lot of young people are using it, and it affects it puts people into a psychotic state. People think that marijuana has no effect on people, and that is an absolute flat out lie. There's no way that I would ever accept that argument. And it's ruining young people's lives forever. It's ruining their health, and it's highly addictive.
It was one of the three pillars that got Trudeau elected. The other one was packing his cabinet with 50% women and electoral reform.
Yeah, electoral reform he never did. The marijuana was the big thing. That's why a lot of people I know voted for him people that didn't even do marijuana or smoke marijuana voted for that. Never understood it, but I think that was the only time I voted conservative federally was against that. Um, it's just I had no faith in conservatives after that.
You know, the first time I voted federally, I voted for Trudeau, Harper. Well, that was a slip of the tongue in 2015,
Okay.
and it was like I was pretty young back then, but I still had the presence of mind to know that Trudeau was a charlatan. And I'm like, they're bringing this kid in, they're grooming him. He's got these like fake, phony promotional videos. I'm like, we can't have this guy running the country, and I was right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people saw the writing on the wall with Trudeau, just his arrogant nature in general. Like that's not good for a politician at all. Politicians should be humble and reasonable, and not narcissistic to the core like this fella is. Ideally, he's the most narcissistic person I think I've ever seen in my life ever. Just unbelievable.
Let me ask you about like your when you were running as a camp, you said that you're not a religious person. What kind of response would you get at the door if somebody was a religious person? Was it just like a no-go?
No, a lot of the religious community in PEI was very open to the PPC, and I'm very open to what I believe. If somebody asked me about it, I'd be very forward. Like we've used churches for events, um, and so there's no religious part of the PPC platform. Like there's no pro-religion thing. It's pretty neutral. But they're just protecting their freedoms and the freedom to do what they want. Like the lockdowns was a big thing of the government overreach going into the churches and shutting them down. The PPC was very, very much against that openly. Maxime got arrested when all that was happening, if you recall. So the religious community viewed us as kind of their savior to stop the encroachment on what they believe. So it was very positive. Anytime if anybody asked me like personally what I believed, I would be very open to tell them, as long as they're a reasonable person and not one of these extreme fundamentalists that that's religion of any type is not good. So when you get into that territory, it's a bit difficult. But I never encountered that in my campaigning. There was very few religious questions at all. People just knew that the PPC stood up for their freedoms, and that's what they appreciated.
What about shifting gears to PPC policy? I know we didn't prep for this episode, so you might not be ready, but what's your favorite, like, what would you say are the top one, two, three policies that you agree with?
Probably the immigration would be the biggest one, and that I think that's top of people's minds mostly. So as I said, we recently changed it. I believe it was capping the numbers at 150,000. I believe I could be slightly off on that, but now it's a complete moratorium stop. Um, that is completely necessary for the country in general. We need to figure out what's going on. We need to prioritize Canadians. As far as other policies, I like them a lot. The firearm policy is kind of just like I don't know if we officially say that we'll not have a registry even for restricted, but just like let people have firearms, let people use firearms. Even for the self defense, that's another really good one. Is that we are proposing at the minute that we should at least have pepper spray. Pepper spray is illegal in Canada. A lot of people don't know that. Although, caveat, you can have dog spray as long as you have it to use on dogs and you're very scared of dogs. Just remember that. Um, but it's stuff like that where like the other parties aren't even willing to discuss it at all. And the fact that Maxime has a self defense policy saying that people should be allowed to defend themselves, like how common sense is that? Um, and I think that's a really good one. There is equalization payments is another really good one. Quebec, I believe, gets something like 13 point something billion a year of equalization payments. What's the rest of Canada getting into that? Nothing. So a complete redo of the equalization payment system, and I believe part of that is that it would be renegotiated every couple of years. It shouldn't just be a flat thing forever. Um, the rest of Canada is getting the shaft when Quebec's getting $13 billion just for sitting there. So those are some off the top of my head. Obviously, I agree with I think all of them. I'm not sure I have any really disagreements, but those three are the ones I talk about a lot.
I was looking through it the other day, and the ones that I would rank them in this order: the freedom of speech one, and then the
Yes.
bodily autonomy one, I guess self defense,
Yep.
and the third one is the gun rights. And they're pretty much all. I mush them all together. I say all rights are property rights. They're just all the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are good ones as well. Like the ones I said, I wouldn't even have them in a particular order, except for immigration. I probably put number one at the minute. But there's a lot of good policies, and if people would take the time to read them, like they're not even complicated. I think they've added a few since the last time I did my spiel, but I think there's 18 of them. Like it's not a catalog like you get from the other parties, and our policies are on our page year round, election year or not. The other parties have to do polling and like it's like the Sears catalog coming out every time election time comes around. You can't wait to see what the policies are going to be, but you know what to expect from the PPC in general. And I think people underappreciate that.
I keep going back to Max. Like he's put out a lot of long format posts the last few days. One was he called out these liberals. He goes, they spent the last 9 years saying that we're an evil, racist, settler nation, and then all of a sudden they're patriotic based on what Trump has said. But you contrast that with the other party leaders, like they just talk in slogans. Like there's nothing there.
Well, Mr. Slogan himself, Pierre, people are getting very annoyed with that, and I'm sure the polling will tell him to stop soon because that's all he listens to is polls. Yeah, like the outrage over Trump going on about Canada being the 51st state it really tickles me inside because first of all he's trolling. He's saying it to disrespect the political leadership in Canada. That is literally what he's doing. If you know Trump at all, he is not disrespecting Canadians. He is not actually serious. But his message is that Canada is not doing its fair share and needs to step up. And so you have all these politicians, liberals, virtue signaling, and you have all these conservatives saying, "Oh, Canada first and Canada always." It's like, well, congratulations to coming to the party late, but I don't think that's genuine. Um, you should say. I think one of the things I said earlier on Twitter was that it was one of the conservative MPs. He said that Canada first, Canada always. Is that starting now is what you should have put the end of that because before Trump said that, that was not what you said. You like
Somebody
people are
should
coming out of the woodwork to virtue signal is all they're doing. They don't mean it.
somebody should
And
hack the Conservative Party website and just pipe it over to the PPC's platform so they can just steal it easier.
yeah, they're slowly taking over our policies. Maybe someday that they'll just they'll cave and shut down the party and join us. Maybe.
Yeah, it's like we don't even have to win elections at this rate. They'll just, we'll take over the Conservative Party in reverse. They'll do all the work.
Well, that's one of the big talking points that Maxime goes on about now is that we're in 2 elections. We haven't won a seat, but the progress that the PPC has made is extraordinary. I believe that single-handedly, as a federal party, we have shifted the Overton window into that the Conservative Party is now taking not only our slogans, Canada First, but like our platform policies. They're literally poaching stuff off our website. And guess what? Take it, but just give us the credit for it. Say that PBC said it first. It'd be nice. Like we're shifting the window without even having a seat. Like that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, they'll never give us credit for it, but I have a
No,
feeling if you went into CPC HQ, like they got all these screens of the PPC logos and the website. So
yeah, it won't happen, but I'll keep telling them anyway.
What else can we talk about? I got a hard stop in about 10 minutes. I got another episode after this, but
Sure.
what's your province? So let's talk about your province versus mine. I'm in BC. We look to the east and we feel like Ottawa, Ontario, and Toronto, Quebec, they just don't care about us. We never think about the maritime provinces. What's your view on BC? Like, is it even an issue for you guys?
To be honest, BC never really hits our radar. It's so far away, and we have lots of stuff going on here. Our little province. Yeah, the only view that anyone ever says of BC is that that's where everyone goes to do drugs. That's what you guys are known as, I guess, now. But yeah, we don't really talk about BC and PEI at all, ever. It's almost like a different country over there.
Yeah. You know, one thing that's different over here, we call Ontario and Quebec the East, and we call you guys the Maritime provinces. In Ontario and Quebec, they call you guys the East, and they call us the West. They're like the center of the universe.
Yeah. We call you guys the West as well. Um, I guess we'd be the Far East to you guys. For you guys during during COVID and lockdowns, how was the BC in relation to that? Because PEI was the worst, I think, in Canada, next to Quebec
You know,
anyway.
it really breaks my heart because the one claim to fame that BC has is that we are the worst at everything in Canada.
Yeah.
But in COVID, I think Quebec was probably the worst. They actually had a curfew.
Yeah, well, PEI had PEI is an island, and we weren't able to leave the island. Like, there's only one bridge on and off, and you couldn't go anywhere. It was like Alcatraz over here. It was really bad. And I was in nursing at the time, so actually that's something we could have went into if we had more time. But so I was in nursing. I worked at the provincial psychiatric hospital um, during the start of COVID, and being present for all the meetings, like the bigwigs came down, and it's a very tight knit hospital. It's small, so I was in a lot of meetings going on about what COVID is, what to expect, and it's very eye opening that they had no idea what they were doing whatsoever. It was very clear. They changed their policies. One time it was 3 times within one business day of what to do. They changed back and forth, back and forth. Um, but the COVID thing was huge on PEI. You were trapped. You couldn't go to any other province unless you got the vaccine, and even then, it was not easy. So that's what we got, a lot of support from Islanders because of the extremely draconian way that they handled COVID on PEI. It was very bad.
I mean, BC was bad too. Like obviously you couldn't fly, you couldn't get on a bus, you couldn't get on a
Mm.
ferry, you couldn't leave the States. You could technically drive to Alberta, so that's one benefit we had. But like I just say you're a leper. Like if you didn't have the vaccine, you were a leper. You weren't
Yeah,
allowed in any restaurants anywhere. And just the lack of humanity. Like nobody, not your neighbor, not your family, not your friends, nobody stood up and said, "Hold on. I've known this guy all my life. Government just taxes me. I don't trust the government. F off." Like nobody did that.
yeah. There's very little of it here as well. Yeah, just to be part of the uh, inside of the healthcare during that was very eye opening, and that's one of the reasons that I did the candidacy thing, because the government overreach was extreme, and they were basing all their actions off nothing, like the masking, for example. So when COVID first started in China, and it was kind of all over the news there, a lot of people don't know is that they literally came into the hospitals. I was there. They rounded up all of our PPE and shipped it to China, so we had nothing when it came here. Um, it, like it was so mismanaged that it drove me to action, and ended up here, I guess.
Yeah, the more and more. I was born in Iran. More and more Canada is resembling the Islamic Republic of Iran. Like they're very, very authoritarian in their decision making.
Yeah, but they have the power of the media, so the media makes them seem like the Dalai Lama, when in reality,
Again, again, just like Iran, they have state media.
exactly. Yeah, it's and that's there's corporate media, like government funded media, should be banned in Canada. I think that's one thing that completely banned. You cannot give funding to the media because it has to be independent. All the major media organizations in Canada would have been bankrupt many times by now if they weren't propped up by Trudeau. And of course, if a government is literally keeping your company alive for 9 years, then obviously you're going to be pretty favorable for your representation towards them.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing that's got to go. And it's just this whole concept of money. Like, there's just so much money that we give to the federal government, and they use it, they wield it as a weapon.
Yeah.
Scott, so I guess yeah, we're 45 minutes. It's one of the shorter episodes, but do you want to leave either a message of optimism for the audience, or where they can go and find out about you, or maybe put a call out for potential PPC candidates?
Yes. Well, the only place I really go on is Twitter. So PPC_McPhee is my Twitter. I'm there getting liberals mad every day. So if you want some entertainment. But yeah, a big thing is that we need candidates on PEI. we're in the talks with a couple people that are very nice, but we want a full slate of dedicated candidates for all 4 ridings. So if anybody has any interest in riding, in running for riding, reach out to us. But a message, a closing message. I would just say the way that I live my life is I try to be as honest and reasonable as possible. I'm a big follower of Jordan Peterson, even though he's turned very religious recently. It's unfortunate, but I always follow the philosophies that you don't lie, or tell the truth, but at least don't lie, and it will bring you on the adventure of your life. And that's where it's brought me, and it's very challenging, but it's worth it.
Well, Mr. McPhee, thank you very much for coming on the show, and best of luck in fielding your full slate of candidates.
Thank you for having me on, sir. I appreciate it.
Bye.